nosotros teníamos.
We hoped that our children would get a better education because their parents would have a secure job and a better salary. We hoped that students would be able to obtain scholarships so that their education wouldn't have to end after primary school, but that they could go on to university.
Canción del minero.
Well, when the mine arrived, our expectations were that we were going to live a little bit better here. We felt encouraged because we thought we were going to improve our community. We thought we'd be able to improve our housing and build a better future for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. We thought the ejido, our community, would change, but that hasn't been the case.
In February 2013, a delegation coordinated by the United Steelworkers traveled to Mexico. Their objective was to investigate human rights abuses being committed by Canadian mining companies. The steelworkers were joined by members of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, the Communication, Energy and Paper Workers Union, and Kairos. As concerned Canadians, they were not prepared for what they encountered.
We've been shocked and appalled at some of the human rights abuses that we've seen, abuses both of the human rights of communities and the labor rights of workers. It's been hard to hear some of the stories, and we're kind of frankly angry about some of the things that we've seen.
Working with the Mexican human rights organization, ProDesk, the delegation visited two communities impacted by Canadian mining companies, one in the state of Oaxaca and the other in the state of Durango.
La historia que tenemos en México sobre la extracción.
This has been happening in Mexico for the past 500 years. Foreigners removing minerals like gold without regard for rights of the indigenous people, harming the land and the territory. This changed fundamentally with the free trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada in 1994. This brought in a flood of foreign investments that had the consequences of a bomb going off.
Canadian mining companies have found few restrictions to maximizing profits when operating in Mexico. These companies are taking advantage of the open-door policies of the Mexican government, as well as a national labor law that stacks the deck against independent trade unions. Small communities and workers trying to organize have little ability to put a stop to violations being committed by Canadian companies, and even less capacity to win compensation for damages done to them. These companies have deep pockets, plus the backing of the Mexican government. And more importantly, the companies have the implicit support of the many levels of Mexican police and military. In the state of Oaxaca, the delegation visited the heavily divided community of San Jose del Progreso. Here, Fortuno Silver, a Vancouver-based company, has a mine right at the edge of town. Since the mine's arrival, the community can no longer hold town meetings. It has a church divided between pro-mine and anti-mine members. This community has experienced firsthand the ugly side of foreign resource extraction.
When a company has a project, along with the government, it presents it to the community. If the community is interested, the project is carried out. If not, it doesn't. That is all we want here, nothing more than that. We are not asking for anything else, or that the company is shut down. That is not our position. All we want is that you ask the community.
The company is supplying the people supporting the mine with water from the mine and with tanker trucks, and that is why they keep going. But just like the mine is protecting them now, it will eventually not do it anymore, and they will have to look at the real needs. Soon, the devastation will be more noticeable, and the company will start pouring in more money. It will do everything possible to maintain the municipal power and win.
In the state of Durango, in the small, hard Scrabble town of La Sierrita, Exelon's silver and gold mine was cautiously welcomed. In 2008, the community celebrated a hard-fought deal with the company. The agreement included long-term economic development, local employment, and environmental safeguards. At the time, this deal was a model of cooperation.
Esta empresa hizo un convenio con los ejidatarios en las que estableció condiciones.
This company signed a contract with the ejidatarios and agreed to build a water treatment plant to make the water usable for agricultural purposes. But far from complying with this, what they've done instead is extract the water from the mine, which contains a high concentration of arsenic, and dump it.
La empresa nos engañó bastante, pues no ha cumplido.
The company lied to us. They haven't complied with anything in the contract. They played around with us and deceived us. This has hurt us a lot because instead of getting better, we've gotten worse here in the ejido. We can no longer be on our lands with dignity because everything has been destroyed. The water, our roads. We thought that by organizing a peaceful blockade, we would find a solution, that the company would sit down at the table and talk with us. But this wasn't the case.
Estuve presente en el campamento.
On October 24th, I was present at the peaceful protest camp that was happening. It's difficult to talk about it because we felt trampled on and humiliated. They violated our human rights. Protesting is a right that we all have, and repressing that right is a crime. We weren't doing anything harmful. Our peaceful camp was to defend our rights as the landowners. They arrived and burned down our housing. For me personally, it was so hard. They threw my things on the ground. Everyone was crying and crying. They burned the houses. It hurts me to remember it was a peaceful camp with kids and seniors. We always thought that if someone would come to remove us, it would be the army or federal police. But to realize it was the company representative itself, it wasn't necessary to have so much violence. To bring in machines, to destroy our possessions, and then the Canadian arrived and was laughing at us and chatting with the women. It was so painful and so unnecessary.
A major part of the conflict at the Exelon mine is about workers' rights. The right to bargain for well-paid work, the right to safe working conditions, the right for workers to freely choose their union. These are all rights enshrined in international law. These are rights that Exelon has chosen to ignore.
Hubo amenazas hacia los compañeros.
There were threats against the brothers. Threats that if they didn't vote for the company union, they were going to fire the people that didn't vote that way. And if you associated with the union, they said, I'm going to change your shift. I'm going to take away your bonus.
On July 5th, 2012, a union representation vote took place at the mine.
Así es, trabajé con Exelon 2 años y medio.
I worked at Exelon 2.5 years. I started as a laborer. Around 1.5 years, when we decided to form a union, the company started with reprisals. When they found out that I was involved with the union, they demoted me. They reduced my wages. They changed my shifts. They were looking for an excuse to fire me.
Company threats and intimidation worked. The independent union lost by 1 vote. And then Exelon made good on its threats.
Pues también estamos en la misma situación de.
We are all in the same situation of being fired for having supported the Elio La Cerita. Because we supported their struggle and they prevented us from going into the mine. Because we affiliated to local union 309, we were fired.
Fue el último día que yo trabajé en la mina.
My last day of work was July 7th, 2011. After a period during which the community had the mine stopped, the company forcefully restarted working the mine with every single authority, police, military, municipal and state officials, as if the aliados were criminals.
54 workers, about 1/3 of the workforce, were fired by Exelon because they supported the National Miners Union.
Pues yo sí quiero de una puntualizar ahí de una manera que algunas.
It is important that the Canadian government pay attention to this issue because I know that companies have codes of conduct in Canada whereby they are supposed to respect human and labor rights in countries where companies operate and invest. The union's message is that we are not against investment because investment brings jobs, but that irresponsible investment brings with it many problems like pollution and exploitation.
It is experiences such as these in Durango and Oaxaca that have led to a growing social movement in Latin America to reject mining. They just want Canadian mining companies to leave them alone and to stay home.
Coming out of the trip, it's very clear there's human rights violations and there's violations of workers' rights. We need, as steelworkers, to do something about it. We need to take action. We need to pressure the Canadian government so that there are standards and rules that Canadian companies have to follow. People in Mexico, in the 2 cases that we visited, aren't getting justice. And if they get justice, it'll be long delayed, and that's not good enough. So we can't count on changes in Mexico right away to address that problem. What we need is the Canadian government to put rules in place, legislation in place that will hold Canadian companies accountable for what they are doing outside of Canada. So people in Mexico can have access to justice in a reasonable time frame, and they can fix the situation that they're in.
El mensaje que nosotros venimos planteando.
Ever since we started doing human rights defense work, our message has always been very clear. It's a message not only for Mexicans and Canadians, but for all communities seeking justice and dignity. And that message is, enough is enough. We just want to be respected.
Basta ya. Necesitamos respeto.
Y aunque me hago, me mate